It was a quiet afternoon when I heard the conversation that would change my life forever. My fiancée, sitting on the couch with her phone in her hand, laughingly murmured something that made me feel a wave of cold run through me. "The best thing you have is money," he said, almost as if he wasn't listening to me, as if those words were just an innocent observation. But for me, they resonated with heartbreaking clarity. In that moment, something inside me changed. I was able to see my life through his eyes, in the crudest and most superficial way possible. Simple access to wealth, nothing more. As if the love we shared, the connection I thought I'd forged, was just a deal where she expected something in return. My anger quietly grew. But when I asked him to sign a prenuptial agreement, the consequences were much more devastating than I imagined. She, unable to control her rage, reacted so violently that she destroyed my house in a fit of fury. Everything that had been a symbol of our life together, of the promise of a shared future, crumbled in the blink of an eye. That house, which had been the foundation on which I built my life, was now full of remains. Not only of broken furniture, but of broken dreams. And here we are now, facing a trial, because she, in her fury, will have to assume the consequences of her actions. I am not a rich kid or a cocky brat, but my achievements, however humble they may seem, are not easy to achieve. Growing up, life taught me a lesson that I never forgot. My parents, although they always worked hard, did not have anything that is considered a fortune today. We went through difficult times where money was so tight that we couldn't even afford to think about luxuries. My father, brave and desperate, took out a risky loan, using our house as collateral, the last valuable possession we had left, an inheritance from my grandfather. That loan became the driving force of a business that, although it began with setbacks, grew slowly but solidly. Those difficult times, although painful, shaped me in ways I could never have imagined. Hunger, the constant struggle to make ends meet, made me understand what really mattered. Effort, tenacity, hard work. Life offered me no luxuries or comforts, and in some ways, that was the best thing that could have happened to me. Humility is something you never forget when you grow up with nothing. My perspective on money changed profoundly. I appreciate every hard-earned penny because I know what it's like to have nothing. I know what it's like to look into the eyes of a loved one and not be able to offer them what they really want because money is tight. That experience pushed me to study, to look for something more than simply existing in this world. It was what drove me to get my MBA because I knew I wanted to add value to what my father had built, not just enjoy the fruits of his labor. Being the son of someone successful does not define me. I have worked to get here, to prove to myself that it is not by chance or inheritance that I occupy the place I have in my father's company. I have given my soul and my effort to make all this work. Today, although my family has achieved economic stability that we never dreamed of, I have not lost my caution. I have learned to be sensible with money, to be aware that, like everything in life, it will not always be there. I have been extremely cautious about my relationships because how do I know who is with me for me and not for what I have? Money can buy many things, but it cannot buy what really matters. During my 20s, when life finally began to smile at me, I met many people. Many dates happened, but few turned into something serious. Don't get me wrong, I enjoyed those experiences, but I never found anything worthwhile. Until one day, on a sunny afternoon, I saw a woman who immediately captivated me. She was beautiful, not only because of her physique, but because of the serenity she radiated. His smile was like a beacon in the middle of the crowd, and his presence, so simple but so confident, made me come closer. Her name was Amara, and I found out she was a nurse. Something about his career attracted me deeply, perhaps because I understood what that profession entailed: dedication, sacrifice, love for others. She was not a superficial woman or interested in money, and that reassured me. I didn't have to worry about my possessions being the only thing keeping her close. Amara was genuine, fun, and had a soul that connected with mine. In less than a year, we became inseparable. And after 2 years of building something solid, I asked her to be my wife. And she, with a shy but loving smile, accepted. My happiness had no limits. She was the woman I dreamed of spending the rest of my life with. But things took an unexpected turn when, as I began to learn more about my family's financial situation, something changed in it. He didn't understand the need for a prenuptial agreement, and his words hurt me more than I could have anticipated. According to her, my proposal to sign a prenuptial agreement implied that I did not believe in the durability of our relationship, as if, in some way, he was anticipating failure. But the truth was much more complex than that. It's not that I didn't believe in us, it's that I didn't feel prepared to risk everything that had cost so much effort to build. The second reason, and the one that hurt me the most, was that she interpreted my proposal as a lack of trust in her honesty, as if she thought she might try to take everything from me in case things didn't work out. The situation between us became tense, and although I tried to explain my reasons, his frustration only increased. Despite my attempt to make her understand, something broke between us. And now, looking at the pieces of my life scattered by the judgment we face, I wonder if I will ever be able to find the balance between true love and protecting what I have worked so hard to build. The argument that night was a whirlwind of emotions, a silent battle that pulled us both in opposite directions until we found ourselves at a dead end. Hours and hours passed, with each of us trying to understand the other, and as the words flew and stabbed like knives, our love, which had once been unbreakable, seemed to slowly crumble. In the end, we each fell asleep in our corner, wounded and with our souls full of bitterness, like two strangers sharing the same space without being able to touch each other. At dawn, the clarity of daylight made me realize how absurd everything had been. I had spent an entire night thinking about it, but in the end, I decided I should let it go. I loved Amara so much. I felt that what we had built was worth more than any disagreement. Yes, I know, it was an impulsive and perhaps stupid decision, but I loved her, and that blinded me. It made me think that I could let even the darkest moments pass, because in my heart, I felt that together we could overcome any obstacle. I didn't want a misunderstanding or a bad decision to ruin what our story had been. The following weeks were much calmer, and my life seemed to be back on track. It seemed that the waters had calmed, and the spark between us, although somewhat extinguished, was still alive. But then a day came that would change everything. It was an invitation that Amara had received from one of her colleagues, a barbecue. The idea seemed good to me, an opportunity to get to know better some of the people with whom she shared her work life. Something I had heard mentioned on several occasions, but had never really experienced. I decided to attend, thinking it could be a way to strengthen ties and understand more about Amara's world. When I arrived at the party, everyone seemed very friendly, smiling, and the atmosphere was relaxed. Chatting about sports and what was happening in the stock market was a little refuge for me, away from the recent tensions. I felt good among the laughter and camaraderie of those strangers, all seemingly genuine. But while I was distracted by a conversation, Amara was inside, joking with her friends, and although it didn't bother me at all, something prompted me to walk towards the back door of the house, looking for respite. What happened next was something I could never have imagined. As I headed to the bathroom, I heard voices, laughter, and although curiosity is never a good guide, I couldn't help but stay and listen. From the back door, I could hear Amara, unaware that I was there, talking to her friends. They started with light comments about how good I looked, and I thought everything was fine. Maybe it was just friendly talk. But at some point, the conversation changed direction. The laughter became a little sharper, colder. They talked about how expensive I dressed, what I had, and somehow my money became the center of the conversation. The feeling that something was not right began to permeate me. When I heard Amara say those words, as if they were a trick that had slipped out of her mouth without realizing it, I felt out of breath. He has a lot of money, she said. And honestly, the best thing about him, the best part of him, is his money. The girl's laughter resonated in my head like an endless echo. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was like a time bomb had been dropped on me, shattering everything I had considered sincere. And then he said it, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. He asked me for a prenuptial agreement, and of course, I said no. I have to be able to keep something if things get tough. I couldn't take it anymore. I felt like my world was falling apart in an instant. I left the house without saying a word, not even caring about the bathroom I had originally searched for. My mind was in total chaos. The woman I had planned to spend the rest of my life with, who I had shared dreams with, now seemed to be someone completely different. Silence enveloped me as I walked through the garden, fighting a tide of emotions. On the one hand, my heart wanted to believe that it had all been a silly joke, an unimportant conversation that had gone sideways. But on the other hand, I couldn't ignore what I had heard, the words that followed me like shadows. What had happened to the woman he had met? Was it really love we shared, or just an illusion? Now, I didn't know if I should let it go, if I should find a solution, or if I should nip everything in the bud. I didn't know what to do. My mind was telling me that I should end it all, because this was the type of behavior I had always feared. Someone who saw in me not the man I am, but the money I have. And that, for me, was the biggest betrayal. For years, I had looked for someone to share my life with, without fearing that my money was the main reason they stayed with me. But here I was, in that moment, questioning everything. The woman I had considered perfect, who I had dreamed of having by my side, now seemed to be just a shadow of who I thought she was. My heart told me to talk to her, to clarify things. But did it make sense? After hearing those words, seeing how my money became the center of his world, I was no longer sure of anything. How could I trust someone who seemed to value material things so much? I didn't want to give up on Amara, but in that moment, I felt like everything I had believed in was crumbling, like sandcastles swept away by the tide. I knew I had to make a decision, and although my love for her weighed heavily on my chest, I also understood that relationships must be based on more than just the possession of wealth. My mind told me that I should cut ties now, before I continued to lose myself in something that was never what it seemed. Doubt gnawed at me, but in the end, my heart had its voice, and I didn't know if I should listen to it or follow what my reason dictated. Here I am in front of you, giving the update that many of you were waiting for, although I confess that the words I write now come out with a deep weight, as if each one of them carried the weight of an entire story that, although I did not want to live. Today, I have to tell. What began as an attempt to resolve a simple disagreement over a prenuptial agreement ended up being the outcome that many already knew would come, although I insisted on not seeing it. A week passed since that fateful barbecue, a week in which I tried to let the waters calm down. But the truth is, deep down, I knew I had to face it again. I needed Amara to see my point, not out of pride, but out of something deeper. The desire to protect what my family had built, what my father had risked his life to achieve. So I called her, sat her down in front of me, and with my soul still conflicted, I told her that we needed to talk about the prenuptial agreement one more time. And in that moment, everything he had tried to avoid came flooding back. The fury I saw in his eyes disarmed me. She told me again that my doubts about her were an insult to our love, that suggesting a prenup was a sign that she didn't believe in the future of our relationship. I tried with all my might to redirect the conversation, explaining that it was not about her, but about the company, about my father, about what cost so much to build. But she didn't accept it. He didn't care. His anger grew, and my words went out like a candle in the wind. I asked her directly, my voice breaking, but firm, "Would you marry me if I told you that this agreement was binding? I thought that perhaps, with that simple question, I would find an honest answer. But not. She didn't hesitate. In his face, I did not see love, but rather a calculating reflection. I would reconsider, he told me, and that's when I realized that nothing I said would change the way he saw things. I was trapped in a bubble that I didn't want to break, and neither I nor my love would be able to deflate it. I then asked him to remember that conversation at the barbecue. That conversation that somehow had remained recorded in my mind in red letters. I mentioned the exact words I had heard with my own ears. The best thing about him is his money. Her laugh full of complicity with her friends, contempt disguised as a joke. When I mentioned all this to her, her face transformed, as if the ground beneath her had begun to give way. I saw her tremble, her hands at the level of her face, unable to hold my gaze. He didn't say anything, but the silence said it all. The tension grew, and perhaps driven by a mixture of anger and sadness, I began to laugh. It was not a laugh of joy, but one of disdain, as if the bitterness of the moment had seeped into my being, and in that moment something broke in her. The tears began to fall, at first timidly, and then with such desperate force that it hurt. He didn't know if his tears were of regret, shame, or simply despair at the truth he could no longer hide. He looked at me, but didn't say anything. She just let herself fall to the ground, unable to process what she had just discovered about herself. I turned my back on him, and headed to our room. I locked the door and went to bed, but I couldn't sleep. The next morning, when I opened my eyes, there she was, waiting for me, her eyes swollen, as if she had been fighting her own demons all night. She approached me, but I pushed her away. He couldn't allow things to continue as if nothing had happened. She tried to explain herself, look for excuses, as if everything was the fault of the people around her. I didn't mean what I said, he told me. I was trying to fit in, follow the flow of the conversation. But I knew that wasn't what really mattered. What he had said wasn't just a trivial joke. It was a revelation of what he really thought, what he really valued. She said she would sign the prenuptial agreement, which wasn't a problem for her, but honestly, words had no value to me anymore. I gently took her hand, looking into her eyes for the last time, and it was in that moment that I understood that there was nothing left to save. I took off her engagement ring, slowly, as if I were stripping myself of everything I once believed had been ours. That ring, which had cost more than anyone could imagine, no longer made sense in his hands. My heart hardened. It was a small act, but so definitive. And Amara's reaction was so immediate that it almost made me feel compassion. He began to cry, but his tears quickly turned into insults, into words of hate. She told me things I had never expected to hear from her. That I was ugly, that I had no charm, that she wasn't attracted to my body, that she had been with another man because she simply felt like it. Honestly, I'm not sure if I should believe everything he said, but at this point, it honestly doesn't matter anymore. Amara's mask fell off in such a heartbreaking way that I don't even know where to start. In his final moments of rage, he unleashed a storm of insults that went far beyond what I ever imagined. My money was the only good thing about me, he said. And then, as if to exorcise all her demons, she told me that she wished she had gotten more out of me, that this was all a game to her. In that instant, the pain transformed into something colder, more distant. The worst thing is that it didn't surprise me. It didn't hurt me as much as it should have, because in my heart, I already knew it. In a fit of fury, I started laughing, although I didn't know why. Perhaps because of the desperation of not being able to do anything else, because of how absurd everything had become. But when the laughter came out so bitterly, the situation took a terrifying turn. Suddenly he stood up, and like an uncontrolled fury, he began to throw everything in his path at me. Books, vases, anything he could use as projectiles. For a moment, I felt like I was in a movie, but the reality was much harsher. I tried to stay calm, to be stoic, but I couldn't. Danger was present in each of his movements, so I retreated, seeking refuge in our room. I locked the door, and for more than 2 hours, the chaos continued outside, while I listened to the sound of the destruction she was causing. Finally, when I came out, the place was unrecognizable. Amara's fury had left its mark on every corner of the house. The walls, the furniture, everything was in pieces. My heart was pounding, not only from fury and betrayal, but also from the certainty that I had made the right decision. This was no longer a relationship. It was a war. I took photos of everything I could and looked for some security camera footage to have proof of what had happened. It no longer mattered to repair what had been destroyed. The destruction was a reminder of everything we had lost. I left the house, leaving behind everything we had shared, and headed to a hotel. I felt like the chaos had swallowed me whole. There, in the solitude of a cold room, I decided to do something I never thought I would do. Take complete control of the situation. I went to his social networks, his Facebook, his Instagram, and posted the message I had been waiting for. The wedding was canceled, and I was no longer engaged to Amara. The truth, without embellishments. The confrontation he had had with her, the lies, the destruction. Everything came to light. To each surprise comment, I responded with the same coldness. If you have any questions, ask her. He couldn't stop smiling, thinking about how he would react when he saw what he had done. I knew how much he cared about his image, and watching it all fall apart publicly gave me a strange satisfaction. But I didn't stop there. I posted photos of the destruction, the broken vases, the scarred walls, the smashed furniture, and some clips of her in full attack, breaking everything in her path. The worst thing, or maybe the best thing for me, was that I tagged his family, his friends, and of course, the hospital where he worked. That part was a touch of fun, knowing that gossip would begin to circulate among his colleagues. Calls from his parents were immediate, but I didn't answer any of them. It had cost me so much to try to maintain a cordial relationship with them. But now it all seemed so irrelevant. She, for her part, started calling me dozens of times, but I didn't give her the time to respond. The only time I answered was when he left me a message filled with sobs and threats. She was screaming about how he had humiliated her, about how everyone looked at her differently now, calling her Brianna from Tark for the aggressive behavior she displayed in the video. I found it ridiculous, but also a little fascinating to see how everything turned against him. She told me that everyone would see her as crazy now, and although for a second I felt a flicker of worry, I remembered what I had done and how I had reacted. This was not the Amara he had known. There was nothing of her in that overflowing rage. In the end, nothing serious happened. No more calls, no more threats, just a wave of empty words that no longer touched me. I decided to cancel everything, contact the wedding planner, and give her clear instructions so that everything would be in the past. That call, that cancellation, was a palpable pain in my chest. The dream of what had been our life together crumbled with every word, but I knew it was the right thing to do. I knew that even though the pain was there, it would be much more painful to stay with someone who only saw me as a walking wallet. The last move, the one that really gave me some peace, was that I decided to sue her. Not just because of the destruction of my property, but because she should face the consequences of what she did. I had already asked him to pay, and when he responded with insults, I knew there was no turning back. Now it was a matter of seeing how all this was resolved in court. I know this is all painful, but at least now I have clarity. The wound is deep, but I prefer to face it now, before losing myself further in a lie that could have lasted years. I thank everyone who supported me in this process, and I will be reading your comments. If anyone has any suggestions about what I did, or if they think I should have done something differently, I'm open to hearing them. But for now, I know I'm on the right path. And even if the future is uncertain, at least I'm free. Here I am again, with a little update for those following this story. If you thought things couldn't get any worse or better, you were wrong. Today, I had to receive compensation for all the destruction that Amara caused in my apartment. A total of $987. It's not a fortune, but honestly, the smile on my face couldn't have been bigger. I'm taking money from her after everything that happened. A small payment for all the chaos he created and a sign that justice, even on a small scale, is finally being felt. She should have been the one to sign a prenuptial agreement, but fate decided that I should do it. This update is not about another confrontation or some dirty play by Amara. No, this is simply an update on everything that has happened since our separation. First of all, I can say with relief that everything that broke in my house has been replaced and repaired. The place is as spotless as if nothing had happened. Although the compensation was low, the peace of mind of knowing that I no longer have to live with someone who only saw me as a wallet is what really matters. As for Amara, I heard that she was fired from the hospital where she worked. Apparently, he had a morality clause in his contract, and after his performance, the employers decided to dispense with it. I don't blame them in the least. If I were his boss, I would have made the same decision as well. She reacted so dramatically that security had to intervene when she became hysterical. After that, Amara decided, of course, to go back to social media, where, without mentioning my name, she tried to imply that everything that happened to her was the fault of rich people like me. He said things like, people with money just want to trample on others. A mutual friend sent me a screenshot, and seeing how she manipulated the situation, I just blocked her account and moved on with my life. As for me, I haven't started dating anyone. It's still too early for that. Besides, how could I trust anyone after what happened? I'm wondering if anyone here has been in my shoes and can give me some advice. The truth is, if I ever get engaged again, I will sign a prenup without a second thought. But what I really want to know is how to find someone who loves me for who I am and not for what I have. How do normal people meet normal girls? Sometimes I feel like my money is a curse. Hello again, Reddit people. I can't believe I'm writing another update, but it looks like the story isn't over yet. On Sunday morning, Amara showed up at my house. He told me he wanted to talk urgently, but honestly, I wasn't going to fall into his trap again. I didn't open the door for him. I would rather speak through her 1,000 times than allow her to enter my life again. At first, he insisted that he wanted to talk face to face, but I saw it coming. I knew that anything he did would be manipulation, something more to try to get into my house and make me pay for everything. That's when he dropped the bomb on me. I'm pregnant, she told me. She wanted me to take responsibility for the baby. I was paralyzed. I asked him if he had any tests, any pregnancy tests, but he didn't say anything else. He just turned around and left. I don't know what I wanted to achieve with that. Maybe he was trying to trap me with a fake pregnancy, or maybe he thought I would freak out and give in. It's absurd because as soon as he mentioned the paternity test, everything would be revealed. But what left me worried the most was not the pregnancy. It was the realization that she wasn't just after my money, but something much more sinister. He was completely out of it. And in some ways, I feel lucky to have realized this now, before the situation became even more complex. I think this will be my last update. The story with Amara seems to have come to an end. After everything that happened, I now know that he has left town. Maybe the lack of work, after she was laid off, was a deciding factor. The truth is that I have no idea where it is, nor do I care. I don't mind that he's gone. In fact, it is a great peace of mind. The risk of it continuing to appear in my house or in my life has disappeared. This is final closure, and although there is some pain in knowing that something that could have been beautiful was destroyed so quickly, at least I don't have to continue living with that uncertainty. Now I'm ready to move forward. This experience has taught me a lot about people and what it means to truly love someone. And although it has been a difficult process, I'm grateful to have discovered the truth in time. If anything good comes out of all this, it's that I now know exactly what I want and what I don't want in a relationship.